It's a great pleasure to welcome Jolynn Reen. She is a certified trainer and Microsoft Master Instructor with over 30 years of experience. Thank you, Jolynn. Please take it away.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, Matthew. And welcome everyone to our session today. As Matthew said, we're talking about Excel data validation. I'm sorry, Excel data analysis, which includes data validation. So when it comes to using Excel, the desktop version is what I'm going to be using here for our session today. I will be using the latest version of Microsoft Excel, just so you're aware. I am not in the online version. So before we get started, there's a couple of use cases that we wanted to share with you. When it comes to using Excel, these are the different areas that you could actually be involved in that you could take advantage of Excel. But anyway, there should be the handout in the chat along with a practice file. The practice file is called Excel Data Analysis for Accountants or business leaders, of course. But if you want to go ahead and open that, you could follow along. The first thing that I really wanted to mention is when it comes to working in Excel, there's a lot of different tools that we're going to cover today. So I might go a little quick because I want to make sure we get them all in. But there's a lot of different tools that we have that we can use to analyze data. And Microsoft has always recognized the fact that that's what we do in Excel. We enter our information in, or however we get our information in Excel, and then we need to analyze it in some way, shape, or form. And one of the things that they have done is given us an easy way to do that. On the home tab of the ribbon, we have an icon over on the right-hand side that is actually called Analyze Data. So if you are within a range of cells, so you don't want to be on a blank cell because it won't recognize the range. But if you have a range of data, like right now I'm on A4 of this references worksheet. And if I click Analyze Data, it opens up a pane on the right-hand side. It selects the range of cells. And what it just did was it gave us on the right, it gave us a box at the top where we could ask questions about the range of data. Now, this is not a very big range, but just so you can see, it's giving suggested questions and it's giving these discovery insights. And what this is referring to is pivot tables and or pivot charts. So as I kind of scroll down, you can see that it's got all these different charts, and way down at the bottom, it even has more. So it's only showing the most relevant, but down at the bottom, it says show all 28 results. So there's a lot of different results. Just on this small range of data, it can analyze it in different ways. So we don't even have to do the work. The computer can do it all for us just by using this relatively newer feature called Analyze Data. So as an example, if I wanted to take any of these charts that it's displaying, all I have to do is say Insert Chart, and it's going to automatically insert the chart in your worksheet. Notice how it automatically put the worksheet, or on this worksheet, it automatically gave me the chart. Then I can analyze it further if I needed to. But this to me has saved me so much time and headaches because it's going to do the work for you. So that's one of the analysis tools that I wanted to mention here today. If that's not something you've already used in the past, highly recommend it. Now, as I said, this is a small range of data. Let's say that I go to this worksheet called Company Orders. This has over 1,400 rows of data. If I want to analyze this, I could go back and click Analyze Data again. It's going to recognize the range of cells I'm within, and it's going to give me, of course, different choices. So on the right-hand side, once again, I could ask questions about the data, like maybe I want to know which salesperson had the most sales. It will automatically analyze that for me, and it's giving me a pivot table to give me the results of the question that I asked. I can click the back arrow to go back to the original analysis that it did to begin with. But Pretty cool feature. It even can insert a pivot table based on the data range. So we don't always have to manually do things. Let the computer do the work for you. So that was the first tool that I wanted to show you. If you haven't used it, like I said, definitely want to check it out. But let's talk about a few other analysis tools that are built into Excel that we can be taking advantage of. One of them is going to be data validation. I'm actually going to go to the worksheet called data validation down at the bottom. And I'm going to close my Analyze Data pane on the right-hand side because I'm not going to use it anymore right now. And one of the features that we have in Excel is going to be an option to use data validation. What this allows you to do is to validate existing information, or you can put data validation on blank cells so that as people do data entry, it will automatically make sure that the data being entered matches whatever our criteria is. So we, like I said, we can use it on existing information or on information that has already been entered. So let's see a couple of examples of how to use this, which, by the way, we're going to be using the Data tab of the ribbon for quite a few of the topics here today. The Data tab is where it gives you tools related to analyzing your data, except for that data analysis that we had on the Home tab. But anyway, when you look at the Data tab, on the right-hand side, we have Data Tools, and we're going to be talking about most of those tools here today. So in the Data Tools group, what you want to do is click on the cell where you want to apply the data validation. It could be a range of cells or a single cell. I'm going to go to, why don't I go to destination? So I'm going to go to B4, and let's say that we have a limit as to the destination number of characters we want them to enter when they fill out a travel expense report. Let's say that we want to limit it to 2 characters. They can't type 3 or more, and they can't type just 1 character. We want to say that they have to type 2 characters in this cell. I use that quite a bit to kind of say I want limitations on how many characters can be on a cell, because if you're doing part numbers or anything like that and you want to make sure that they're entering the right amount and not too many and not too less, we can use this feature. So how I'm going to do this is click B4. I'm going to go to the Data tab of the ribbon. In the Data Tools group, I'm going to click the icon, not the drop down, but the icon for data validation. In the data validation window, I'm going to be on the Settings tab, and where it says Allow Any Value, if you click on that drop down, you can see what your choices are. We could limit based on a whole number, a decimal. We could create a list. We could do data validation based on dates or times. We could do text length, which is the one we're going to use, or we could have custom. We could use a custom option. I'm going to choose text length. And where it says data between, I'm going to click on the drop down and I'm going to choose equal to. I could say greater than, it has to be more than 2 characters, it has to be less than 2 characters, but I'm going to say equal. And then for the length, I'm going to put in 2, which means they can't put in 1, they can't put in 4, it has to be 2 characters. Then I'm going to just click OK. Then let's test it. If you are on B4 after applying the data validation, let's say that I go to the cell and I start typing in New York and I press enter. By default, it's going to give me a generic error. That generic error says this value doesn't match the data validation restrictions defined for this cell. But it doesn't tell me what exactly are the restrictions. So just so you know, you can actually be entering more detail. We can create our very own error message. I'm going to go ahead and click retry, and that will allow me to change the information that I entered, and I'm just going to type NY and press enter. As soon as I press enter, it's okay because I put in 2 characters. But I'm going to go back to this cell B4, and I want to modify the data validation I just entered. I'm going to go back to data validation again. It shows me the current validation on that cell. What I'm going to do is go to the Input Message tab. Up at the top next to Settings, it has Input Message. What this is used for is every time someone clicks on the cell, we can give them a screen tip that basically tells them what they should do. So in the input message, I'm going to say enter 2 characters. And I could go to the Error Alert tab. And from the Error Alert, we can stop people from entering invalid information and give them a warning, or I should say give them an error message that makes more sense. So I'm going to keep the style on stop where it's got this red kind of circle here, but just so you know, we can also give them a warning or give them information. If we just give them a warning, it says, hey, you're not supposed to do this, but go ahead, you can change it. You can use that invalid information anyway. We don't really want to do that. We want to stop them from being able to enter invalid information. On the right-hand side, I'm going to click on the title, and I'm going to say invalid department or destination, I guess is what I'm on. Invalid destination. And then in the error message, I'm going to enter, you have entered an invalid destination. Please enter 2 characters. I could put in whatever information I want that's going to help them to know what they need to do. Then when I'm done, I'm going to click OK. So the input message will be displayed when we are clicked on that cell. Okay. Haley, did you have a question?
Hi, Jolene, and I'm so
Hi.
sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to let everyone know here that the handout and the Excel sheet that we intended to share in the chat today, we're having some technical difficulties. So I've actually emailed those out to everyone just now. So if you'd like to check your inbox, you can grab the Excel file to follow along and the nice handout that Jolene prepared. Sorry for interrupting.
No problem. Thank you, Haley, for letting us know. Appreciate that. So data validation is a great way to say, this is what we want to happen on this cell. And I'm going to go to B8, and for the department, when they enter out their travel expenses, I don't want them to enter whatever they want. I want to limit to a list of what they can choose from. I want to give them a drop-down list. In column A, starting on A24 through A30, I do have a list of departments that I'm going to use, but I could hand enter in the list in the data validation window as well. So once again, I click on the cell where I want the data validation. I click the icon for data validation. On the Settings tab, I'm going to choose Allow Any Value, and I'm going to click List. Down at the bottom where it says Source, we could either type in the names of the departments, separating each one with a comma, or if you had the information on a range of cells somewhere, you can click and drag that range. So I selected the range of A4 through A30. I'm going to click OK. Now when I'm on that cell, B8, I have a drop-down arrow and I can choose just from this list. So this way we keep the information consistent, because if you think about a department, we could have somebody be putting in HR, HS, abbreviating human resources, or physically typing in human resources, or they could enter it with a mistake because we're, typing it in. This way we know it's going to be just from the list. I use data validation lists all the time. And as a matter of fact, let me give you an example of where can your values come from? Well, I have this worksheet called company orders. And let's say that I want a unique list of all of these salespeople. This is also on the data tab. I'm going to select all of these salespeople. Starting on C2, I'm going to do Shift Control down arrow. I'm going to copy that range of cells. I'm going to paste it back in the data validation sheet. Although I could put it in any worksheet, it doesn't matter. And maybe I'll put it in a new sheet. I'll paste this in a new sheet. And I want to remove the duplicates. I'm going to do that by going to the Data tab of the ribbon. I'm going to go to the Data Tools and click Remove Duplicates. It's going to analyze my range of cells that it knows I'm using column A. I'm going to click OK, and it gives me a unique list. It's going to tell you how many duplicates it removed and how many unique values it has at the end. I'm going to click OK. Now I have this unique list of all these salespeople. I want it to be sorted alphabetically. So I'm going to click in that column, and on my data tab, I'm going to click A to Z. So I have this list of employees. So I took a long list of duplicates, removed the duplicates, and now I can use it in a drop-down list. So if I go back to data validation, I go to your name on B3, I can use that list by going to the data validation. I'm going to say list. In the source, I'm going to click on the sheet, which is sheet 1. I'm going to select the range of cells I want to use for my list, and I'm going to click OK. So now I have that drop-down list coming from that other sheet, and I can choose the names. So just so you could see a couple of extra steps that we could use to get that list. So it's pretty cool how that data validation can help us. But I want to do a couple more data validation options with you. I want to select B11 through B20. B11 through B20. And I'm going to say that they can only enter a value in that range that is 100 to 500. They can't enter anything less than 100, or they can't enter anything more than 500. I'm going to go to my data validation icon. On the Settings tab, I'm going to click on the drop-down where it says Allow, and I'm going to choose Decimal. And I'm going to say that it has to be between 100 and the maximum of 500. So every time you change an option here, the choices in the window change with you, which is pretty cool that it does that. So once you're done, I'm going to click OK. Now I didn't set up an error, so if I do something wrong, I'll get the generic error. Most of the time I would want to do my error alert, because if they type something wrong, I want to let them know what they need to do. But I'll just click OK for right now. And let's say that I go to B11 and I type in 600. I'm going to get the generic error because it's not valid. It doesn't match that criteria. So I'm going to click retry, and I'm going to put in 459, just so you can see it will automatically accept that. But notice that some of these cells within that range don't match the criteria, because I said it had to be from 100 to 500. There's a couple of cells that had 50. That doesn't match the criteria. So if you have existing information and you apply data validation to it, you can check to see where mistakes are, things that don't match your data validation criteria. Let me show you. If I go to the drop-down arrow for data validation, click on the down arrow, we can choose Circle Invalid Data. Every place that there's invalid information on your sheet will be circled in red. So I can see where the parking and tolls was 50. I can't enter anything under 100. If I put in 120 and press enter, the red circle will disappear because now it matches the criteria. So this is a great way to be able to find invalid information. And a lot of times for me, people are doing data entry, and I want to make sure that when they do the data entry, that it's getting entered correctly. But this information could have been imported or copied and pasted from someplace else, another system or whatever. And this way we can make sure that everything is accurate, whether it's the part numbers or whatever your case might be. So data validation is a great way to make sure that what we're analyzing is correct. Okay. So data validation went from page 3 to page 4 to page 5, just so you know in your handout where that was located at. And the remove duplicates is at the end of page 5. And then the next option that I want to talk about is the what if analysis tools that we have built into Excel. We have 3 different ones that we're going to do today. One is called Scenario Manager, one is called Goal Seek, and Data Table. These are tools that I do use on a regular, well, I don't use Goal Seek as much, but I use Scenario Manager and Data Table all the time. We're going to start with the Scenario Manager. There's a worksheet in your practice file called Scenario. And basically, this is a different list of mailing services where we can mail item ground shipping. We could do it priority overnight. We have some base rates. We have our package counts. And then in column E, we have our revenue. Okay. And in the revenue column down on E8 is the total revenue for all of our services. And what we want to do is we want to say, what if we decide to increase or decrease these base rates? These are our current ones from 2024, but moving into 2025, we want to consider increasing or decreasing these base rates and find out what's going to happen with our revenue. Well, I used to, before I realized the Scenario Manager, I used to copy this, paste it, and then make my changes. And then I had no way to kind of, side-by-side comparison of my scenarios. The Scenario Manager will do all of that for us. So what I'm going to do is select the cells that I'm going to want to change to increase or decrease. That's going to be C3 through C7. These are the numbers that I want to play with. So once I have them selected, I'm going to go to the data tools again. I'm sorry, I'm not going to the data tools. I'm going to the forecast group. I'm going to click on what if analysis and then Scenario Manager. So in the Scenario Manager window, you can see that there are 3 scenarios that have been created. I've got this original base rate, I've got increase base rates and decrease base rates. So these are already here, but if I didn't want one of these, like maybe I don't want this increase base rates, on the right, I click delete. So I'm going to delete 2 of them. I'm going to delete the decrease and increase and just keep the original. I forgot to remove them from the previous class. Sorry, that's my fault. But I'm going to keep this original base rates. And basically, I saved this, gave it the name original base rates because I want to compare what we currently have. I want to be able to get back to what we currently are using. But I want to create a new scenario that we want to increase the base rates and see what's going to happen. I'm going to click Add. It will allow us to add a new scenario. We will give the scenario a name, and I'm going to name it Increase Base Rates. And then I'm going to click OK after I name it, because it's going to take me into the window showing me the current base rates. But notice that on the left-hand side it says 1 through 5 because that's the cells I selected. Some of them say words. Some of them say the cell reference. Just so you're aware, this does take advantage of named ranges. You can look back at the Excel Beyond the Basics sessions that we've done in the past to know more about named ranges, but I named a couple of these cells so that you could see it's a benefit. Highly recommend naming the cells that you're going to base your changes on. So I can see that $9 is ground shipping. Well, I'm going to say, what if we increase that to $11? Then what if we increase the 3-day to actually be $14 and the 2-day shipping to $16, and then the overnight, which I see as C6, maybe we increase that to be $20, and the priority overnight, maybe we increase that to be $28. Once I have these done, I want to create one more. So I'm going to click Add. It saves the scenario we just did. takes us back to the add scenario window, where in the scenario name, I'm going to name this one decrease base rates. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to change the values again, but I'm going to go lower than the originals. So once again, I'm going to say maybe $7.50, and then maybe $10, maybe $12, maybe $15, and maybe $24. Once I'm done, if I don't have any other scenarios I want to create, I'll simply click OK. Then in the scenario manager window, I will see all of the scenarios that we currently have based on that range of cells. And if you notice on the right-hand side, I could add more, I could delete, I could go back and edit any of these. But let's say that I click increase base rate. I can change the values in column C to view the increase base rates by going to the bottom right and clicking show. Once I click show, it updates the column C values, which updates the formulas in column E. So I can see my total revenue is at $906,400,000. But if I go to the scenario manager and click decrease base rates and then click show, it changes the values in column C. So I could just toggle back and forth in between these. But if I click close, it keeps the values that are there. If I want to do the originals again, I would have to go back to original base rate and click show to put them back before I click close. Otherwise, it's going to override those original values. But what if I want a side-by-side comparison of these three scenarios, plus whatever my current values were? In this scenario manager window, I'm going to click summary. Summary will create a new sheet with a side-by-side comparison of each scenario. Can't be any easier. But what it wants to know first is, what is going to be my final result cell? I'm just going to keep it on E8 because that's my total. I'm going to click OK. I now have a new sheet with the summary. What it's going to do is show you by changing the cells, ground, 3-day, 2-day, C6, C7. That's the reason we want to name our cells. And notice E8, I don't know what that is either because I didn't name that cell. So highly recommend naming your cells. But what it did in the columns next to it was it gave us our current values, the original, the increase and the decrease baselines that are scenarios that we saved. I love this side-by-side comparison. And anytime that you go back to the original sheet, make changes to those values or changes to the scenarios, you could rerun the summary and it will give you whatever your current summaries are or scenarios are. So pretty cool feature. I use this quite a few times during the year. So great option to use. Great way to analyze data by letting the computer do the work. So if you ever say, what if? This would be a good tool to use. But let's talk about another option that we have. We have a feature also in that same category called Goal Seek. I'm going to go to the worksheet called Goal Seek. And from this worksheet, we have multiple categories going across: labor, transportation, taxes, and facilities. And then row 3 is the cost of each of those categories. Row 4 is the percentage of the total costs. So it's basically taking it's taking C3 and dividing it by G3. G3 is the total of all the costs for every category. So we can see that right now the labor cost is at 22.79 because it's using decimals. We could, of course, change that to whole numbers and it wouldn't give the decimals, but it's doing 22.79%. Well, what we want to do is find out what if we wanted our transportation cost. We want our transportation cost to only be 30% of the overall costs. We want to get our transportation costs down to 30%. we would have to do the math to figure out what would our cost for transportation need to go to. Because right now we can see that it's at 35 million and it's 44.3%. I'm going to be on D4, cell D4, because that's the percentage I want to get to 30. I'm going to go to the data tab of the ribbon. In the forecast group, I'm going to click what if analysis and choose goal seek. From there, in the dialog box that opens, it has the set cell where we want to set cell D4 to the value of 30%. So we're saying set cell D4 to the value of 30% by changing cell. I'm going to click D3. So it's always going to refer to D3. So it has to change that transportation cost to get D4 to be 30%. I'm going to click OK. But I'm not going to close the window for the goal seek status that just opened, because what it just did was it analyzed how is it going to get it down to 30%. Notice the huge change in the transportation cost. We're down to 18 million. But it also changed the percentages, of course, all the way across in row 4 because it changed G3. The total for G3 has changed, so now we can see the labor cost is up to 28.6, the taxes are at 11.12, we have facilities at over 30%, so it's a great way to be able to say, what if we get our transportation costs down and the overall is only 30%? It's another what if tool. But if we just wanted to play with it to see what we would need to get our transportation costs down to have it only be 30%, we don't have to keep it. We can click cancel on that goal seek status window, and it will put everything back to exactly the way that it was before. If you want to keep it, you would click OK. So that's another tool that we have that can help us analyze our data. But there's more. Also included in that what if analysis is a feature called a data table. I'm going to go to the worksheet called V1 data table. And let me explain first what we're seeing. We have the Outlander Spices monthly payment analysis. In column B, there is a 10% interest rate. There is a number of monthly payments of 12. There is a loan amount of $100,000. What we want to do is figure out how much do we have to pay back on this $100,000 loan with that interest rate of 10%. If we pay it back in 1 year, so 12 months, over on cell E6, I have the formula to help calculate that. So at those current numbers, we would be paying back $8,791.59 if we paid it back for 12 months. So you can see that it's using a PMT function for that. You can see that in the formula bar. But we want to play with this a little bit because we're not sure if we want to do 12 months. We want to do a scenario that says, what if we pay it back in 6 months? Or what if we stretch it out to 90 months? What's going to be our monthly payment? What we want to do is create a data table to perform the calculations for us by having it change the original formula. It will switch out the numbers in column D and put the answers in column E. So next to 6, it will give us if we pay it back in 6 months. Next to 12, it will give us if we pay it back in a year, all the way down through 90 months. To do this, we need to select D6 through E22. D6 through E22 because we need to include the original formula so that when we tell it which cell to switch out from the original formula, it's going to use the values in column D and put the answers automatically for us in column E. All we have to do is go to the Data tab of the ribbon. In that forecast group, click What If Analysis, choose Data Table, And in the dialog box, we could have rows and columns of input values. We only have a column, which is column D. So we're going to click in column input cell. And what we want to replace from the original PMT formula is cell B6. So I'm going to click in the column input cell, and I'm going to choose cell B6. It's going to look to the left of this selected range, use those numbers from column D to give us the answer. I'm going to click OK. That's it. And in column E, if we have this loan for $100,000 and pay it back in 6 months, it's going to be over $13,000 a month. But if we stretch it out to 90 months for that $100,000 loan, it's going to be $1,583. So this is a way that we can really have it help us to analyze this data further than us having to do the work. Let the computer do the work. One more quick example with this is a 2-variable table. So I'm going to go to the V2 data table. Same scenario with the interest rate, 2%, the number of monthly payments, 12, loan amount of 100,000. There's a formula on B7. And what we want to do is know what if the interest rate is 3 to 9%? And what if we pay it back between 6 and 90 months? We could use 2 variables to figure this out. What we want to do is select B7 through, oops, I don't want to move it. Select B7 through I-22. Select all the columns going across and all the row numbers going down so that each empty cell will have the answer. Then I'm going to go back to the what if analysis, click on data table again, and from this dialog box, I'm going to use both a row and a column. The row input cell is based on those 3%, 4%, 5%, but in the original formula, it was B4. So I'm going to click cell B4. Then I'm going to click in that box for column input cell, and that's going to be B5 because I wanted to switch out that 6 through 90. Then all we have to do is click OK. If you got hashtags, of course, your columns wouldn't be wide enough. Otherwise, you're going to see the answer. And we can then use this. It's crosstab report is basically what it just created. So if I end up having a 5% interest and I pay it back in 18 months, I can line up the 5% in the 18 months to find out I'm going to pay back $5,778.05 a month. So it's a great way to say, what if? What if the interest rate changes? What if the number of monthly payments change? Now, I was using a PMT function for these examples, but you can look up on the internet. There's a lot of different examples, not just using a PMT function. Lots of different choices depending on what it is you're analyzing. So definitely check it out. I love those features. But let's move on to another topic. I want to do a lookup function with you. Because when we analyze data, a lot of times we need to look up a value out of a range of cells. I'm going to go to the worksheet called Employee Departments. And I want to be able to look up an employee ID number and have it provide me with their last name, first name, department, or whatever else I need for information about the employee. So what I want to do is on cell B2, I have an employee ID number. So let's say they call up the support desk and they say, I need to find out information about this employee. Well, what's your employee ID number? So we enter in the employee ID number, and the XLOOKUP can look through the database to find the corresponding information related to that employee ID. So we've got this range of data that could reside anywhere. It doesn't have to be on the same sheet of where you're doing your formula from. But I'm going to go to C2, and I want to find the last name that matches that employee ID. So what I'm going to do is equal, because I'm doing a formula, the letter X. There is a newer function that came out not too long ago called an XLOOKUP. I'm going to double click the XLOOKUP from the drop-down list, and it has several different arguments to it, but we don't need to use all of them. Notice the ones that are in the square brackets, those are optional. It is required to put in the lookup value. What I want it to look up is B2. I want it to find that employee ID number, comma, it needs to know the lookup array. What that argument means is where is it going to find that employee ID? That's going to be in column B. I'm going to select B6 down through the end of the list, which is B52. And in the formula, as you're seeing in the formula bar, I would then need a comma after that column. And what it's looking for now in the arguments is the return array. So which column do we want to get the answer from? And we want the last name, so that's going to be this range of cells, G6 through G52. I could leave it as that and do Control Enter, and it will automatically match up the last name of the person with that employee ID number. Every time we change that ID number, it will change the last name as well. So an XLOOKUP is just looking for where am I going to find the lookup value and where is the answer going to come from. If you've ever used a VLOOKUP or an HLOOKUP, match, index, those types of other lookup functions, this is a replacement of that. And it includes more features than we ever had. An XLOOKUP can do an HLOOKUP where it looks horizontally or vertically. Whatever direction we need it to go in, the XLOOKUP can do both. So personally, I don't use the VLOOKUP or the HLOOKUP anymore. But I want to show you one more example of this, because what if I wanted to find a lot of information? Like, let's say that I want to find the department, the date hired, all of this information going across. I'm just going to copy these column headings and paste them over in column A. So I wanted to automatically look up all this information. And I'm just going to make these columns wider here. So I'm going to actually go to K1 or K2 underneath the department. I wanted to look up that employee ID number, find the department, the date hired, the degree, everything going all the way across. I wanted to find all of that information. We only have to do one formula to find all of that. With a VLOOKUP or an HLOOKUP, we would have had to do separate formulas for each column, not with an XLOOKUP. So I'm going to do equal X. I'm going to double click on XLOOKUP again. It needs to know the value I want it to look up. That's going to be B2. Comma to separate the arguments. It needs to know the lookup array. That's going to be B6 down through B52 again. Comma for the return array, where I want the answers to come from. I can choose multiple columns. I don't have to choose just one. I'm going to select C6 through I52. C6 through I52. Then I'm going to add one more thing in here just so you know that it's a part of the XLOOKUP. I'm going to do a comma. If not found is an optional argument. What that means is if the employee ID number is not found within that range that it's looking it up in, we can get an error message. And I'm going to do quote, and I'm going to say employee ID not found. Quote, and I'm going to do my right paren. I'm going to Control Enter, and you're going to see that it automatically looked up the employee ID number. It found their department, their date of hire, which needs to be formatted as a date. We just changed that to a short date. It found their degree, their salary, their last name, first name, and their initials. So every time that we change this employee ID number, it's going to locate all of that information for us. But if we put in an invalid employee ID number, In the generic XLOOKUP that I did, where I didn't say, here's the error, we get a generic NA. But over here in K2, where I did the XLOOKUP and put in an error code, it now says employee ID not found. So when we looked it up, it didn't find that employee out of that list. So great way to be able to help analyze your data. I love the XLOOKUP. If you have not tried it yet, in your handout you will find different information breaking apart each of the arguments and a few examples on how to use it as well. But once again, you can find other examples available out on the internet. Lots of pretty cool features. And also, the last function that I want to talk about right now is the subtotal. Because when we have this list of employees, what if we're going to be filtering this list? Or we want to be able to say how many people in the whatever department, what is their total salary in that department? We have a few different ways that we can actually do the addition of that. So I'm just going to go to a blank. I'm going to go to, let's say I go to F2 and I want to get a subtotal of the sales department salaries. I want to know how much do we pay every person in the department sales. I'm going to do equal the letter SU. I'm going to double click on subtotal, and subtotal can do several different functions. I want to do a sum, so I'm going to double click the number 9. I'm going to put in a comma to go to the next argument, and it wants to know what are the cells that I want to base this on. Well, subtotal is only going to base it based on those salaries. So I'm going to select the column for salary. And what this is going to do is give us a total of all the salaries. If we filter this list, which let me go to the data tab, turn on filters. If I filter this list by the sales department, I'm only looking at sales, the subtotal will automatically update to just the records we're seeing. That's great, but one other way to do this, I'm going to clear my filter from department. Another way to do that is do the sum if. If I want to get a sum, if it matches a criteria, we can do that as well. So I'm going to go to G2. I'm going to do equal SU. I'm going to double click on sum if. I'm going to say that I wanted to analyze the range of cells for the department. I wanted to look at all these departments, comma, the criteria in quotes because it's text. I'm going to put the word sales. So I wanted to look in the department column for the word sales, comma, the range that I want it to sum is going to be the salaries. So that's going to be F6 down through F52. I'm going to control enter and it automatically adds together all the sales department salaries. So both work, but one required me to filter the data. Just so you know, we have different ways that we can analyze it depending on what you want it to do. Okay, great little options depending on what you want it to do. Now there is a couple of other topics that are in your handout. We don't have time to cover all of those. There's a forecast option. We won't get into the forecasting feature. But I do want to mention just two other things. And one is geographical locations. I'm not sure if you know this, but if you work with geographical data, which I'm going to go to the worksheet called Maps, where I have some geographical information. I've got these different states, I've got these different countries, and I'm going to select the countries. And I need to get different criteria about these countries. If I go to the data tab of the ribbon, we've got this data types group. And here I'm actually going to click geography. It automatically adds a link to the internet to grab information about each of these countries. Notice I'm getting this little icon here where it's called Insert Data. I have this long list of all this different information. Now that I've linked the names of the countries, I can find out what their birth rate is, what their country code is, what their currency code is, whatever information I need about those countries. I simply click the option and it looks for the next available column and it will add that data. So it didn't mess up my quarter numbers. It added it to the next column, which I did currency codes. Then if I go back to the drop down again with having all those selected, maybe I want to know a description. It will insert the description. So we can continue to add different information related to each of these countries. It's directly connected to the internet. I use this quite often when I'm working with geographical data because it's connected to the internet. It's always current. So it's great to have that full connectivity without us having to go out and analyze it and do copying and pasting and different things like that. So just so you know, that's built into Excel. Now, the last quick topic that I want to cover with you today is pivot tables. When it comes to analyzing data, we can definitely take advantage of using a pivot table. I'm going to go to the company orders worksheet where we have this list of all these different products that were sold to a customer name, a company name, which resides in a specific country and has a specific salesperson. Now I could use, from the Home tab of the ribbon, I could use that analyze data to have it give me some suggestions or ask it questions. I could also use Copilot, but I'm going to say from the Insert tab of the ribbon, I want to click the icon for pivot table because I want to be able to ask multiple questions on this same range of cells. So from here, it selects my range, and I'm just going to keep it on new worksheet. So my pivot table goes on a brand new sheet. I'm going to click OK. So it select my range, so I'm directly connected to that original range of cells. We build the pivot table from the right-hand side of the screen, but the pivot table will technically be displayed on the left-hand side in your columns and rows. On the right-hand side, it's going to give you a list of each of the column headings. So it had a column for company name, country, etc. Let's say that I want to answer a question. I need to analyze that range of data, which could be 1,000,000 rows of data. I need to know who had the highest sales. I'm going to choose salesperson. It's going to automatically give me a unique list of salespeople in column A. Then I'm going to click in front of extended price. It adds a column B, and it's giving me a sum of extended price, where it took all of that range of data, and in 2 seconds it did a subtotal of all of the sales per person. Pretty amazing. Matthew, did someone have a question?
We have no questions at the moment, but I do want to open up the room for questions. If you want to turn on your microphone and ask a question, now would be the time. If you do speak up now, you won't be included in the recording that may be published in other places. So just so you know, you will remain anonymous outside of this session here today.
Excellent.
But,
so
yeah.
let me show you something here. So Matthew, I don't know if you ever use pivot tables, but if I want this sorted based on who had the highest sales, I could actually go to column B, do a right click, and then hesitate on sort and do sort largest to smallest. So it sorts this pivot table to show that Margaret Peacock actually had the highest sales. But if I want to see what products were sold, I can go back to the right-hand side, click in front of product name, and it's going to indent the names of the products that each person sold underneath their name. And it's giving us a subtotal in column B based on how much of each of those products did they sell. To me, this is a no-brainer. This is how I analyze my data every single day, because I have different questions that I need to answer, and a pivot table allows us to quickly and easily add and remove what we need to see or what we don't want to see. So if I change my mind and I don't want product name, but I need to see the countries that the products were sold in, I could choose country. Now I'm seeing all of the countries. I'm seeing all of the salespeople in all of the countries. One last thing is, what if I want to filter this? I don't want to see all orders. I want to see just based on a date range. I want to see just the orders placed within a range. I can actually go to the ribbon, to the Pivot Table Analyze tab. In the filter group, I can click Insert Timeline, and I can choose Order Date, click OK, and it gives me a filter window called a timeline that I could say I only want to see the orders placed in a certain date range, like maybe January of 2024. It just filtered the list to only show orders that were placed in January. If I want to see based on quarters, based on years, we can also do that. So now I'm seeing all orders that were placed in Q1 of 2024. So it makes it super easy for us to change our minds. I can't live without pivot tables. I don't know about you, Matthew, but I got to tell you, this is my favorite data analysis tool.
Oh
Now,
my goodness, yeah.
Isn't that easy?
Yeah, and a huge time saver. I mean, you can get so much work done with such little effort with these pivot tables.
And if I go back to that original data, could you imagine trying to do that in
my
this
goodness.
range? Some
Yeah.
of it would be impossible, or some of it would take you hours, if not days, to figure
Yeah.
out.
And several
And a pivot
other
table?
tables, yeah.
Yes, exactly. And a pivot table does it with 1 or 2 clicks.
There we go.
So if they
Okay.
haven't used that yet, highly recommend it.
For sure.
So
All
let's bring
right.
it back to you.